do this to me. Okay. Thank you, Harish, and thank you, Aditi, for bringing me into the HR Milestones fold. Better late than never. I'm really, really happy to be part of this very eclectic HR fraternity. And I hope to contribute to the best of my ability going forward. This is really my first association and my first event with HR Milestones. And surprisingly, when I sort of discussed it with Harish about what could be a specific HR topic, he somehow latched onto the fact that I've had such a varied corporate experience for myself over so many years, and of different kinds, because I was sharing anecdotes with him. I was talking to him about various experiences. He said, why don't you just take us through, the corporate journey that you've had, and we will learn from that, because there's so much that has been there. I was a little pensive to start with, because didn't know whether a personal story or a personal career journey will be of interest to all the audience. But then I took it upon myself to curate some of those, some of that journey for being relevant to possibly the audience here. So right up start, a disclaimer. Every word that I would speak of is very, very personal. It has either happened to me in person, or I have actually seen it up close. Otherwise, it's not something which is a hearsay or something that I've picked up from here. If there are transgressions, do stay with me, and I apologize upfront for that. But at the end of the day, if there's anything that any one of you can take away from my journey, and I feel that there's empathy and there's camaraderie around it, and it has been appreciated, I'll be very happy. So with that, I'd just like to launch into it. So as Aditi said, I was born with the name Debjani Chakrabarti, now Roy, of course, after marriage. I was an only child of a comfortable middle-class family. My parents were very supportive, very, very kind and God-fearing people, to be very honest. I was not born in Delhi, I was born in Kolkata, but within 2 years of my life, we shifted to Delhi primarily because of my father's vocation. He was in pharmaceuticals in the corporate world himself. So pretty much I've been a Delhiite throughout. When I look back and I think about the kind of a journey that I've had in the corporate, I often ask myself that is that, when I came senses, and when I started thinking about how do I really want to shape myself, what are things that interest me, what do I want to be, a little child, growing into influences, looking at things around, I asked myself that is this what I really wanted to be, and is this how it all started in a very methodical manner? The answer is no. The first thing that I'd like to present before the audience is my entry into the corporate, especially in human resources, was a matter of absolute, default, not by design. I was not somebody who had started life thinking, or when I was growing up and I was choosing for myself which areas and which pretty much should be the route I should take. It was never the corporate world, because I was familiar with the corporate, but I wanted something very different for myself. And it also happened to be the dream of my parents, which was primarily the bureaucracy. So right from a very small child, my dad wanted me to be in the IAS. There were a lot of IAS officers who were there in the fraternity. I had technocrats, I had bureaucrats in the family. And, it was my dad's dream that the only child that he had should move into bureaucracy, because that's something that he nurtured as a future for me. And pretty much everything that I did, whether it's school, choice of the subjects that one needs to have, moving into graduation studies and then post-graduation studies, I think I was picking up and doing everything in order to fulfill that dream. So I was quite an accomplished student. Let me put that up front without any false modesty. I was a general, proficiency winner throughout my career, throughout my school career. I used to be called a blue coat, because in Delhi public school, everybody wears a green coat. But then if you win general proficiencies year after year in a line for 3 years, you get a blue coat. And unfortunately, I never managed to get a green coat. I always landed up with a blue coat. So I was quite accomplished academically. I was well put to pursue any kind of career in my 10th. I think the largest amount of marks I scored for myself was actually in sciences. And then I opted for humanities because, I had to move into the IS, and everybody told me, and it was there for one to know that in the IS, combination of humanities subjects or liberal arts, would always take you forward. So a lot of my teachers actually called my father at that time, and these are learnings. For people, even today, I see parents putting so much pressure on their children, on what they want them to do. Now, I knew that my father had a dream for me, but then I had co-opted that dream. I was being pushed down my throat because I also pretty much cherished the idea of being a part of the bureaucracy, because I saw within the family what kind of clout and what kind of power they actually yielded. So when after the 10th, my teachers called my dad and said, ये पहली बार हम देख रहे हैं किसी लड़की को अपने पैर पे खुद से कुल्हाड़ी मार रही हैं with 100 in physics and a 99 in chemistry, and 100 in biology. What is she doing taking humanities in 11th, 12th? You know, with a combination of history and political science and economics. So, my dad was very, very nonchalant. He said, we have discussed it. This is what she wants to pursue. I see no reason to actually tell her otherwise, and that's the way it'll be. I think they were very disappointed. I think the whole group of my professors or my teachers really gave up on me that day and said that, this is something which is going wrong. There's not much that we can do, so just let her be. So, after even my 12th, which I accredited, I moved into a very good college in Delhi, Lady Shriram College, um, and picked up history honors. That was really the turning point. I think the first turning point really came during my graduation years. When I was completing my second year and moving into my third year, something happened in the Indian political system which completely changed my ideology and pushed me into an arena which I had not really considered, something which was going to be a mainstay from there onwards. And this was called the Mandal Commission. So when I was completing my second year history honors and doing very well for myself, again, academically, I was, I think, the topper in my college. And in the second year, I had stood second in the Delhi University, second only to a student from Sri Ram College. So, this Mandal Commission broke open, and suddenly student activism became a very, very, very alive subject right then. And more we understood this rationale or the misrationale behind what was being suggested and projected. And there was a lot of wrath and a lot of anger around. I also got swept up, I think, in that movement, impressionable years, a lot of ideology, some right and some misplaced maybe. But then who's to judge? Because at that point of time, you were on a high and you were a part of a movement. And I led a movement where we actually out the parliament. We went and did a procession march in front of the Air India, the All India Radio building. And I had even become a victim of a lathi charge and air sprays, I mean, water sprays and air sprays through cannons. So student activism suddenly became a very large part of my life. And with that, I think this entire, blue-eyed vision of being a part of the bureaucracy, looking at what the politics and bureaucratic nexus was coming to stay put, how the equation was changing, how the dynamics were changing, including a lot of stories I was getting to hear from my own family members who were part of the bureaucracy, as I had already said, unnerved me a bit. And for the first time, I think I questioned myself whether I really wanted to be a part of that fraternity anymore. It was not an easy decision, but just to say that in the first year itself, I mean, when I moved out, I decided to join. I did not join any MA immediately. I decided to sit for the IS just for the sake of it, because it was at a turning point. I was still in a dilemma whether to do it or not to do it. I sat first time for the IS. I cleared my prelims and I cleared my mains in the first chance itself. I still have the letter which told me that I had qualified for my mains and I was now going to go for the interview. I still have kept it because a lot of people actually don't believe when I tell them this. So, including my daughter for that matter. So, but then suddenly that was the time when I chose, there were certain incidents, there were certain people who influenced me a lot, and I chose finally not to go in for that interview, and I gave up my entire dream of being in the Indian Administrative Service right then and there. Um, it was a very big decision, very big decision. I found that my father was very supportive. He was not a happy person because he obviously couldn't put it down that I had given up on that dream which we had lived together for so long. But nevertheless, I think that support, that unstated support, which he knew he could not deny me, was there throughout, and that probably gave me the courage to see through with my decisions. I joined JNU. Why JNU? Because it was considered to be a very elite, a very novel institute at that time, not the kind that we are familiar with today. The literary pursuits of people in JNU at that time were actually talked about. The research capabilities were absolutely top notch. And apart from that, this newfound love for student activism told me that, there's a bit of that even in JNU, so why not? So I joined what is known as the School of International Relations because I reasoned with myself that if not the Indian Administrative Service, then let's at least do something where if not national, then international law. There were careers which you could build out of it. So I joined IR, School of International Studies, and passed out of international studies in the year 1993. And I topped JNU. As a matter of fact, my record of international studies of 7.82 CGPA is still there today. It has not been broken. So, there's a tradition in JNU that if you top international studies, you get a chance to sit for a scholarship called the Nehru Cambridge Scholarship for MPhil PhD. And by virtue of the fact that I was the topper, I was given an opportunity to appear for an interview. This was held in Teen Murti Marg, where the Nehru family actually were staying. I remember PC Alexander was the person from the Congress party who was heading the entire panel of about 12 members who cross-quizzed me on anything and everything to do with national politics, international relations, and what have you, including my idols, my idealism, my theories, whatever that they wanted to know. And finally, I got what I wanted, which was the scholarship for 4 years. By 4 years, it was to be 1 year MPhil and 3 years PhD, combined in Cambridge University. It had a bond because it was completely sponsored by JNU. And the bond said that after completion of 4 years, I had to come back and serve JNU for 2 years as an associate professor, after which I would be free to then look for opportunities outside. I then went to Cambridge. Seems like a dream today, another dream which went bust. There would be no mention of a Cambridge in my resume today because unlike a lot of people today who go for 3-month courses and write that they have been part of the IIMs and have done the courses like as if they have completed the 2 years, we were not taught those ethics and those principles that, when you don't complete something or you only do half of it, you actually splurge it on your resume. I'm being very, very blunt about this, but then something which I don't really like about today's generation. So I was there in Cambridge for about 8 months. The first 8 months, brilliant. I mean, you can't imagine what that kind of an experience can do to a person when you're walking down the corridors. And from JNU to a Cambridge, it was a very different world altogether. You had the thinkers. You were walking down corridors. You were looking at classrooms which were named after thinkers. You had the best of the brains teaching you eclectic liberal arts. And we had such lovely, structural studies that we were going in. 8 months down the line, I think the crisis struck my family. I shared that my dad was in the pharmaceutical industry. He was heading sales and marketing in Ranbaxy at that time. A very, very stressful job where he used to travel almost like 25 to 30 days in a month. And he was a chain smoker to go with it. He had two massive coronary heart attacks at that time. And while the first one was something which we still were okay with, my mom told me to hold on and not sort of think about breaking, the scholarship and coming back. The second one was something where, we almost lost him. He was in the ICU for about 27 days, and we didn't really know whether we managed to pull him through. I don't think there was even an iota of diffidence in me at that time to take that call that, I was not going to be staying put in a Cambridge, whereas my mother, and for that matter, my person who was my idol throughout my life. I mean, he was battling for life. So that was the second turning point of my career, where I gave up on my scholarship, broke it, came back, undersigned to JNU that I was not going to not going to go back again, and therefore I forego that particular opportunity. And for about next 6 months, we nursed back dad, and he was partly paralytic after that. His left side had fallen, so he could never go back to the active being. So the whole scenario at home had changed, in a sense that I had suddenly become a very adult person in the family, in a sense that I was beginning to take decisions. My dad was primarily indisposed. My mom had always been a homemaker. She was a very, very accomplished person at being a homemaker, but then homemakers don't really battle problems outside. And honestly, at that point of time, and I want all of you to appreciate my feeling at this point of time, when I was looking up, down, left, right, I was at a crossroad where I didn't know what I was really going in for. All my classmates, my batchmates from Lady Shriram, even some from JNU, primarily because they had pursued their vocation and they had gone through with what they had wanted to be, many of them in the IS itself. I found that they were already in stable state themselves. They were going ahead with their dreams. They were already settled. Some of them were also heading for matrimony. Whereas I neither had a qualified professional degree to myself. I was a first class postgraduate, that's it. And in a subject like international relations, which doesn't necessarily lead you to any functional job overnight. So with that kind of clarity in mind, I knew for myself that there wasn't much that education was going to take me forward at that point of time. What could I do? I didn't want to waste my time. So I decided to just take the ball up from whichever court I could get and start playing the game. So I started sitting for open competitive exams in multiple public sector opportunities, in banks, even in the IB, Intelligence Bureau. So at that point of time, I mean, I was not clear in my head what really I was going in for, except to know that I wanted to get working as fast as possible. So you can see by now the name of human resource or management has not even occurred even once till I was almost at an age where a lot of people had already started working. So what happened was I qualified for Steel Authority, I qualified for National Aluminum Company, I qualified for a couple of bank jobs, probationary officers, and at that point of time, my parents had shifted back to Kolkata, which was, where a lot of my other relatives, at least extended family, were staying, and we thought it better. I decided that NALCO could be an opportunity, National Aluminum Company could be an opportunity where I could possibly go and pick up a job. Two clear reasons. One being that they were hiring the first batch of management trainees. Till then, they had only hired graduate engineer trainees, but they had decided to now hire management trainees. And they did not say that they wanted management graduates. They wanted for a first division graduate studies only. They wanted people to be qualified as graduates. So and second reason was it was an overnight journey from Kolkata. I thought that even if I had to stay in Bhubaneswar, I could always come home on Friday night and go back on Monday morning. So with that reasoning in mind, I went and joined National Aluminum Company, start of my career in 1994 as a management trainee. It was a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I can't imagine. There are a lot of people where, there are lots and lots of people who feel that public sector organizations, what are they good for? They're slow moving, they have very little to offer you in terms of exposure. I would say that, I mean, they are talking from possibly half-baked information. Unless you would have actually experienced, you wouldn't know what kind of proficiencies and what kind of precision working in a public sector environment can give you. And Nalco was one of the Navratnas. It was a cash-rich company. It had already a strategic alliance with Alcoa of Canada. So in every possible way, it was nothing less than a quasi MNC company, except that it was based in Orissa, and it was primarily an Orissa-based organization. I stayed 3 years in Nalco, and that is where my journey in human resources started. For the first year, when this management traineeship happened, we were rotated around in every function. And in the evening, we were taken for 6 months of that 1 year. For evening classes, we were transported to Exam Bhubaneswar and given capsule courses in management theory. So combined, we were upskilling ourselves both in theory and understanding a little bit of the management. Plus, we were getting an absolute raw hands-on training in the different departments of quality, of production, of finance, of personnel, because there was no human resource at that time, it was personnel, and what have you. And at the end of the 11th month, we had what is known as an assessment center. And public sectors are huge, they're just like the presidential batches themselves. The director personnel, he would sit, with a lobby of around 7, 8 people who would again quiz you, put you through exams, put you through different kind of psychometric, and then ask you about, the different vocations that you'd gone through. And at the end of it, when they told me that, what is it that you choose? We have done our assessment as to what you'll be good for, but what do you choose? I told them marketing, because that's something which I was familiar with. And I found that, marketing is something where it was more tangible to me, I would say. Uh, Mr. B.D. Singh, my director personnel, smiled and said, "This is not selling soaps and shampoos. This is not FMCG. This is industrial marketing. And I don't expect a lady like you to move into, with vendors and, industrial vendors and all. It's not a ball game that possibly I will encourage you to go in for." And then I asked him, I said, "Okay, and but you said that you've already assessed what I'll be good for. So then why don't you tell me? If not marketing, what should I move into?" And he said, "Personnel, rather human resources, because we would want to rechristen the personnel department into human resources, human resource development." And I said, "But that's only training, and that's only coordination of performances, and just doing that annual appraisals." He says, "No, there's much more. It's just, it's just there for you to examine and do a lot more, which probably we as HR professionals or personnel professionals have not managed to do. So what are you waiting for? If you really think that personnel and HR is only that much, then there's a whole world out there for you to explore. And come back and tell me at the end of 6 months, we're going to post you into the personnel department or the HRD, as we will call it from now. Come back and tell me after 5, 6 months whether you really want to stay here. And if you are still not convinced, we'll try and post you in some other place which you feel better." That's where it started. And till date, I haven't looked back. That was my baptism into human resource, with very little understanding about what that function was all about, except very, very myopic ideas about what could be subsections of HR. I possibly had far greater idea about what a finance function or a marketing function would be. But then every step that happened thereafter, including some of the large projects that I undertook in Nalco itself, is very, very grateful to some of the management guys there, some of my bosses, who who led me by example, and taught me to photocopy a paper with the symmetries correctly, to even strategizing at the head of a table. Because they taught me this tremendous logic that there's no work which is low or which is high, and there's no work which is low or which is high and there's no anyone else. So I think with learning such as those, and with the ability and the empowerment even at that level to do a few things differently, I conducted a large intra-communication study. I was allowed to actually even visit other organizations like the Bhopal unit of BHEL, and study what kind of internal communication forums that they used to have. Because one of the things I realized in NALCO was that there was a huge amount of psychological isolation that existed between the management and the supervisory and the workman category. The unit units did not talk to the corporate. The units didn't even know what the corporate was all about in free flows. So much so that people had a fear psychosis, and this had to, somehow needed to at least reduced, if not completely done away with. So I suggested something called an open forum, and where the CMD, the chairman, along with his department and functional heads, once in 3 months would actually go to the units, sit down. I mean, one unit was in Damanjori, the smelting, and the other one was the bauxite mines, Damanjori and Anagol. Absolutely, Santhal and very backward areas in Orissa, but beautiful places with tremendous amount of ability of hard work that people demonstrated. And they had to get the right path. So these were some of the very, very new kind of experiences that I was allowed to do. And with the blessings, I think I started falling in love with this function. I realized that it had great potential. Not only did it have the ability to touch the human psychology in very, very direct ways and actually work very closely, and there was an excitement about it every day, but you actually had the power. Okay, and I mean, if you wanted to abuse it, you could obviously wreck the environment. But if you wanted to put it to good use, you had the power to actually see changes in the culture and changes which would bring about a larger good in the working environment right up front. So I think that is what excited me about HR, and that is what convinced me that this is where I wanted to be from here onwards. And since then till today, I continue to be an HR professional, very, very proud HR professional, completely in love with it. If suddenly somebody tells me, if you were to be reborn and be given a chance, I would probably now, without a doubt, say I would want to go back working with people. I would want to be an HR professional. I mean, it's been a tremendous journey thus far. From NALCO, I came back to Delhi. I worked with a large number of organizations, I would say fortunate enough to be the first person to have been picked up by Bharti in the year 1996, end of 1996. I was the first member of their corporate HR. They had no HR at that time. They had one member who was a personal manager. This is not the Bharti that we know today. They had just managed to get the license for Airtel Delhi, not even commissioned the services, and they had just signed up on their agreement with British Telecom and Telecom Italia, companies which were very professional, actually a professional organization, and that possibly forced the Mittal brothers to look at setting up the human resource department for the first time. So for the first time, the human resource director from NTPC, Mr. G.K. Agarwal, joined, and I joined as the first deputy to him in Bharti. Very short, 10 years I stayed with Bharti. When I joined them, of course, as I told them, they were not even known as a telecom player. They were known as, just a company manufacturing EPBT telephone sets as a joint venture with Siemens. By the time I left them, they had become telecom kings of the country. Not only had we launched Airtel, we had launched landline telephony. We were the first one to launch internet, which is Mantra Online, VSAT. So you name it, we had done it. Every year was a journey of personal development. Every year was a journey towards professional development. When you associate yourself with a growing company, you grow as much. Your journey also becomes absolutely, mutually symbiotic. And I cannot thank enough again, Bharti Enterprises to have given shape to a professional of the kind that I finally became when I left them. A couple of instances that I'd like to mention from Bharti, couple of achievements. In 1999, Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal himself recommended me to FICCI as one of the best young managers of India. It was a competition at an India level, and we were three managers who finally made the cut. One from GE, the other one from an IT company called ITIL, and the third was myself. Three of us who were given the title of the best young manager of India. And we were sent to Japan, hosted by Nekirian, which was the counterpart of FICCI of India. And for 3.5 weeks, we were given a complete tour of all the best top-notch companies of Japan. understood every bit of their personnel and HR policies, understood the culture of the place, including beautiful trips to Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Okasa, and you name it. And that happened to be, incidentally, my first international trip too. So that was one great achievement that I would to thank that company for. Secondly, while in Bharti itself, I realized one thing, that I needed a management education. I probably had left it behind for quite some time, but what was becoming quite apparent to me is that while I was proficient at my job, I was already a high performer. I was getting promotions every year, but beyond a point, it seemed to me that the progression could become a little redundant and a little slower if you did not have a management education behind you. By that time, I had already got married. That's another story. I won't get into it here. And I had also had my child. She was only about 6 months old when I qualified in CAT and I entered into FMS. I finished my FMS education, and God helped me the way I did it. One of the semester examinations, my daughter, as I said, she was 3 months old at that time. I was still breastfeeding her. And my mother in law would actually carry my little baby in her arms and wait in the car when I was writing my exam. I had taken special permission from the dean, Mr. Singla of FMS, that 1.5 hours I'd write my exam, get into the car, feed her again, and go back and finish my exam. So I've done crazy things. I've really done crazy things. But as they say, extraordinary situations and extraordinary times calls for extraordinary responses. And I think when you have like-minded people and when you have support around you, people who are there to step in for you and help you in every possible way. And I've had some real angels in my journey. Uh, I think even the most impossible becomes a reality. So I completed my FMS studies, and now possibly I had nothing to really look back on. And from there onwards, it was one journey to another. I left left Bharti, went on to HCL Technologies, followed by a very short stint in Wipro. It was primarily the relocation which did not really suit me, so I came back from Bangalore. I did not quite like it at that point of time. Then I went into a company called Bentley Systems. It was a complete startup at that time. We had 75 people in India, only in India, and it was a marketing outfit. And it was the same company as which, manufactures the Bentley cars, except that this was the software division, which was headed by their third brother, the Bentley brothers. I was very happy, started off as the head of HR for India, reporting into a Chinese boss who was the Asia Pac director. And my mandate was that within 2 years' time, I had to develop 2 SDCs, from ground level in India, as well as get into very, very organic, inorganic growth, including very aggressive mergers across Southeast Asia. Accomplished it in 1.5 years' time. I was given the charge of Southeast Asia, and this primarily became my first cross-cultural and international exposure. I had 9 countries reporting into me, including Pakistan, and I did a merger, an acquisition for that matter, in Islamabad. It was a very, very interesting study where I had to actually travel with armed guards, and there was a special life insurance policy which was drawn up by my company just in case anything happened to me. That was left behind with my husband. Um, Adventure all around. It was very, very interesting. The time that I spent with Bentley. Had to take a sabbatical because of health reasons beyond that. But within another 1 year, 10 months' time, I was back to Kwoni, which was the world's largest travel company. Again, I headed South Asia for them. And finally, from Kwoni, I went into Fortis, which is the hospital group. I was taken on by, on the Fortis board, but at that, as a CHRO. But at that time, I think the need of the hour was basically to give much more control and shape to SRL Diagnostics, which was 100% subsidiary of the Fortis Group. So I was deputed as the CHRO of SRL Diagnostics, which is where I spent about 4.5 years. Acquisitions again, complete restructuring of the organization. It was extremely inclusive times, because there was complete change in stakeholder management. The CEO and the top team got actually replaced, except for 2 of us who were functionaries who were found to be fitting into the next level. at least strategic HR was at its best. It actually demonstrated and showed to you the good side as well as the bad side of what HR can be. I think it was a great learning piece. However, one of the things that I had started telling myself around 2018 was that one had begun to repeat oneself, because I had been already a CHRO in 3 different organizations by then, and for about 8 years sitting. And one of the things that I was now missing out was an entrepreneurial bit of trying to do something differently. Because every time one would want to do something differently, you were told that why make the effort? It's already there. You're already a best employer. You've already made the mark in the Hewitt studies. Why reinvent the wheel? Just tweak it and fit it. So somewhere that particular philosophy was not very exciting, and a new animal was actually coming into place in India at that time, and that was by the name of the startups, the new startups, the real startup unicorns that we're talking about. And I was actually looking at an opportunity to move into that space, so that I could unlearn and relearn and remain relevant and do something differently, which would bring back the excitement into the space. So 2019 is when I quit SRL and moved into an advisory space. Today, I am into an advisory space, and I happen to be the chief HR advisor to two IT companies, two major IT companies, one in the transportation space and another in the health space. Besides that, I think one of the things which I have picked up again is a bit of learning for myself, which is a PhD, which I wanted to complete. The idea is also to now become a facilitator between the academic as well as the industry. Remain a facilitator and an activist, because there's a lot that needs to be done between the two. And one of the things which is a passion for me is basically to mentor and coach the next generation of students, which will become the professionals of tomorrow. So I am working with some of the government bodies and the quasi-government bodies in moving with coaching and mentoring some of the undergraduate students in government colleges. I also teach. I've begun to teach. So doing a bit of new things after having run the corporate HR race for about 24 years. So that really sums up pretty much. I mean, I don't think, I can easily say that that captures everything. That doesn't. There have been so many adventures, so many run-ins, including, I mean, a couple of instances that I'd love to narrate. When I was in NALCO again, I mean, imagine how it built resilience in you. Uh, I used to go by train to a place called, Vijayanagaram, and that used to land at about 2 a.m. in the morning. And from there, the company car, it would be an ambassador, would pick me up and take me up a terrain, which was an absolute, Maoist terrain, which were hillside, into the bauxite mine called Damanjori. And during one of those travels, we faced the Maoist people at about 3 a.m., 3:30 it was in the night, with mashals, lighted mashals. They thought this could be one of those captures, they could have of a government official. They wanted to actually they beat up the driver. Um, I could have been molested, and a lot worse could have happened. Fortunately, there were also some people in that, there's always hope and there's always faith, which keeps you alive in the midst of all that. And for myself, and somewhere down the line, I just kept telling myself that this can't be happening to me. It just has to get better. And somehow, I think, just by virtue of that willpower and that positive thought that I kept repeating to myself, there were some people who suddenly looked me up and down. I mean, I was manhandled. I was pulled out of the car, the ground. My driver was unconscious at that time. But some of the people, some people middle-aged, they actually looked at me from close, and I don't know what they saw, but they said, "Jane diyo," which meant let it be, let her go. Jane diyo. I don't know what they found, but I've faced that. I've also faced bosses who've been womanizers. That's another story altogether, and for another day. I faced a lot of angst during my child's growth, not from anybody else in the family, but from her itself. When I was working in Bentley, I used to visit the US quite frequently. And US, as you know, is in a different time zone. And my baby was very small. She was about 4 or 5 years of age at that time. She couldn't understand that why on earth 2 weeks, 3 weeks, mama was not there even to speak to her. So every time I would come back, I had to look at a child who would turn her face away. She would not even meet eye to eye with me. And that's the time when, possibly for the very first time, my husband, my spouse, he turned around and said, I would advise you on what things need to be like. But then, if we have consciously gone in for a family, please do something. Please don't do something which will bring about, development which you will also learn to regret throughout life. I think that was a clarion call, and I learned how to balance after that. I learned how to, despite the stresses and the tribulations of a high-powered job, despite the fact that was a joke we kept saying amongst ourselves, we still, I still managed to sort of tell myself that no, it can't happen this way. And by the grace of God, by doing things differently and by making a few changes in my style of operation, certain things that I probably, we got talking as a family when we grew up and she was growing up. Much better space today. And my 18-year-old daughter today is a very fine child, in a sense that I don't think, as a mother, if I would have been a homemaker or in a teaching job where I could have come back home faster, I could have done better with her upbringing. So there have been challenges. There have been very many challenges, many different kinds. I will not dwell too much on the corporate dirty ones, because that's there for everyone to know, that what a woman who rubs shoulder to shoulder with men at the highest level and who aspires to have the same ambitions as them, what they are put through and what they manage to go through. I think that is there for many of my women colleagues. They are well versed with it. I don't want to really elaborate on that. It's a topic which has been done to death. But yes, some of that one has also enjoyed in the course of the journey. God has been very kind. I mean, I have always learned that in your entire journey, and why I titled this Fact or Fiction is because some of it, when I look back, actually seems like fiction. I mean, I question myself and say, did I really manage to do that? Or did it actually happen to me? And then there are others who tell me that yes, you went through it. I mean, some of those good angels who stepped by when I was going through the rough patches. So I think resilience. I would always tell people, the youngsters who are about to start their career, the mid-managers who sometimes feel so fatigued and so exhausted and feel like giving up on everything, and the top people who make excuses for themselves and say that, oh my God, I mean, can't take it anymore. I think resilience, adaptability, innovation around yourself, critiquing yourself and understanding where you can go better, where you can do better, continuously staying abreast of what's there out for you, and staying relevant. I think these are the 4 or 5 qualities. These are the 4 or 5 attributes, which if you make it your mantra, it just helps you overcome difficulties. It helps you to come to terms with what can happen and what cannot happen for you. It also makes you a much more grounded person and allows you to actually handle both the successes and disappointments and the failures in the same way. You learn how to deal with both with a smile on your face. um, that's possibly what I wanted to share. Just highlighting some of the things which have meant a lot in my career journey thus far. Thank you.
One request. I heard that you are a writer and you are writing a book also. I understand. And if you can, and you said that there are instance looks like a fixer. Can you narrate one at least?
Ah, okay. As I said, there are many anecdotes, plenty of creepy stories, if I may call them, which have been part of this entire journey. People have not all been straight. Uh, and I would say that, I mean, I have been very lucky. I have been very lucky. I have been very fortunate. I have been very blessed. I have been very, very lucky. I have been very fortunate. I have been very lucky. I have been very blessed. I have been very lucky. I have been very fortunate. I have been very lucky. 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 I have been very lu And one is, a child for the first time to go out of home, like I did when I actually left for Cambridge, and then under those circumstances had to come back and then go to a place like Bhubaneswar and then a Damanjodi and an Anagul and take up positions there. The first thing that people would do is to judge you. And my God, one of the things that I learned early up in my career is perception management is a very, very important piece of the works. Let me share with you. I mean, I was a very, very independent person, very independent right from start. One of the things that I did after I actually, I landed up in Bhubaneswar and started my career is, I didn't want to be dependent on anybody. And I realized that, when you're a management trainee, you have bosses, you have middle managers, you have parties that you have to go to, you have meetings and seminars which will sometimes run into the wee hours, the late hours of the night. And sometimes they actually lead to certain amount of embarrassing situations. I must say, they can go averse. They can actually be quite against your sensibilities. And I didn't want to get, caught up in those situations, being dependent and helpless. So first thing I did after I landed up in Bhubaneswar is to buy a second-hand Premier Padmini Fiat for myself. I had learned driving very early up in life. I was a very independent child. I pretty much, I was brought up like a boy, not so much like a girl. So I did practically everything. That differentiation never happened. I was never told to play only with a Barbie doll and not with the Hot Wheels. So that differentiation in my family did not exist. Thank God for that. And so I bought this really nice Premier Padmini, wo piche rounded shape aata tha purane wale. So, and in a town like Bhubaneswar, it's a very sleepy town. It's a very nice, quiet, laid back, very quiet place where 7 baje ke baad, you really don't see people on the streets. It's not a very gregarious, outgoing population which stays there. And more so in my times. So either if you wanted to go partying, you had to go to Bhubaneswar club or somebody's house, or you had to go to one of those hotels. And that was a no-no for a young girl to do alone. But one of the things which I loved doing is there used to be a pastry shop, which was, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bhubaneswar, but there's a hotel called Swasti. And Swasti had a lovely pastry shop. And I had a little bit of a penance for, penchant for a sweet tooth. So I used to drive my Fiat at about 9 maybe after dinner. I was a paying guest with an Odia family. Please keep that in mind. And I used to always follow the rules of the house. Mrs. Mohanty was the name of my lady. The day I left her house, she cried more than I did. I've made bonds that I can never forget in life. So I used to take a permission, drive down my Fiat, and go and have a pastry. And the next day, I will hear in the corridors of Nalco people talking about my character. First, she comes from Delhi. Second, she wears even Western clothes. Okay, jeans was something which was, a Western cloth. People did not wear too much. Okay, and she then goes at 9 o'clock in the night driving a car all by herself. Initially, I tried my level best, trying to even, explain to people that, look, it was just for a butterscotch that I wanted to pick up. Then I said, to hell. And then there were times one did feel bogged down. And I remember one such conversation I had with my mom. I was at my tether's end. I called her up and I started crying. I think one of those very few instances where I gave vent to my frustration and I cried out to her. And I said, I'm coming back. I can't do this anymore. Because, it was almost like हर दिन आपको कटघरे में खड़ा कर देते थे. हर दिन कुछ ना कुछ चर्चे हुआ करते थे. Every new day would be a new story around you. That wasn't funny. Beyond a point, it wasn't funny. So I told my mom, I'm going to come back. So she said, हाँ आ जाओ, but एक बात सोच लेना. You want to make a career for yourself? No, I said, हाँ. She said, ठीक है, यहाँ पर you have a Mohanty, you have a Satpati, you have all of them, and you think that, they're not behaving well with you. आप इधर आ जाओगे तो यहाँ कपूर भी मिलेंगे, खन्ना भी मिलेंगे, हाँ बंगाल में रॉय भी मिलेंगे, बासु भी मिलेंगे, साउथ में रामचंद्रन भी मिलेंगे. किस किस से भागते रहोगे? Do you really think you're going to keep running throughout your life? Or are you going to stand put and find ways to actually meet with those challenges? Let me tell you, that conversation changed my outlook. I decided I'm going to stay put. I will do what it takes, but I'm not going to be a quitter. Again, I told you I had good angels, who helped me in my times of distress. One of the management trainees, I can never forget her family's commitment towards me. They realized that here was this little girl, even if she was like a steel woman outside, she was vulnerable inside and she missed her parents. She was out here on her own. They were residents of Cuttack. And on many of the occasions of the weekends, I would actually be called by my friend's mom to visit home, and she would be just like another surrogate mother, trying to keep my motivation alive. So there have been huge influences of positivity every time when it has looked like there's no road at the end of the tunnel. So I think this whole idea about the book actually was given to me by a very dear colleague of mine called Poonam Nijhawan. She runs a training institute called Cortec Consultants, very proficient trainer and somebody who's very close to me. We've done a lot of programs together, soft skills. She told me that, Deb, the kind of experiences that you've had, and she knows me inside out, and she knows about many of my experiences much more than what I've been able to share here. So she said, Deb, put it together. You are not somebody who should write a management book. Don't write theory. Don't write about leadership. Don't write about, what people should do. That you can speak, that you can go and talk about if somebody wants to hear. But if you really need to want to pen a book, then do so about what learnings, life can teach you. If you're committed to a journey of this kind, make it into a fiction based on facts, make it semi-autobiographical the way you want to, but give it shape. Because I think if you were able to even narrate 60% of what you've gone through and what you've really enjoyed, facing the trials, the tribulations, the good parts and the not so good ones, people will actually, love that book and they would not be able to put it down. So I think that really, Harish, was the genesis of the idea. Um, as I said, till 2019, till the time I was a full-time 365 days, 24 by 7 CHRO of Fortis, I had no time. I literally used to travel 18, 19 days, living out of suitcases. I was on the board of two of the joint venture companies. So it was like crazy work schedules. But today, yes, in the last 12 months, I think I have got in my mind the structure of the characters. At least I've been able to draw up the structure of the characters who will play a big role in my book. And I'm about to start the prelude of my first chapter. Um, Hopefully someday it will see the light of the day.
So very inspiring. And now I would request others to, if anyone wants to ask something, anyone.
There is one question posted by Sonali on chat, and she wants to know, ma'am, that what made you leave Bharti?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. And since it's now a long time, I don't think the corporate office will hold it